Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk Direct. Today we've got Sebastian who is joining us. And for those that don't know Sean, he is a veteran venture capitalist with over 30 years of experience fueling early stage technology. He has invested $300 million across more than 100 seed stage companies. And those companies helping them raise over $4 billion in follow-on financing, which is creating an incredible $18 billion with a B in enterprise value. Sean is widely recognized as a pillar of the regional tech ecosystem here in Pittsburgh. And transparently, he has probably led more Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon-based deals than any other fund in history. So welcome, Sean. Thanks for being here.
Daniela, thanks. Pleased to be here.
Absolutely. So Sean, you have a rich background in kind of macroeconomics and building value, right? So you've watched companies scale from seed stage to creating, I said this in the introduction, $18 billion of enterprise value. When you are looking at B2B startups and trying to find that initial market fit, right? What differentiates the companies that stall out at a few million from the ones that are successfully able to scale into massive high value kind of platforms and technologies?
Great question. So let me first observe that there is a survivor bias in the reporting and the news around venture capital, that the ones that make it, that go public, that become unicorns, deca unicorns are the ones you hear about. You don't hear about the 75 to 90% that never succeed, right? So there's as much learning in the failings as there arguably more learning in the failings than in the successes. And I would say the trend line through of the successes is adaptability. So we get very excited about the founding team, about the fundamental business concept, the addressable market, all the usual things. But often 1 year, 2 years, 3 years into the early journey of these companies, they find the competitive landscape has changed. New entrants have come in. Technology availability has altered the scales pace of companies. And so the companies that can react to that can adapt to changes in the market, are the ones that are most successful. We always do an after-action report of the successes and the fails, what worked, what didn't work. And in the successes, I'll go back and read the business plan that we first invested in 5 years, 7 years ago. And wow, that doesn't look an awful like what we ended up with, because the entrepreneur was able to tune to the market and adjust to the new realities that present themselves to them. So fasten your feet, adaptability, collegial collaboration with hopefully a well-constructed value-add board. Well, we like to think of ourselves as being very investor-friendly and contributive to the process, but also help you build out the board as the company's needs grow and we bring on other money, other people with expertise to help you de-risk and accelerate.
Yeah. Sean, I one of our previous guests, his name was Shelley Stewart. And so one of those success stories that we hear a lot in Pittsburgh is the free market story. And actually, Shelley mentioned it when I interviewed him. But I would love to kind of get from your perspective, what made free markets win at the time? And did that happen with free markets where, the first entry point or the first idea that kind of started there, was it the same as when was acquired and you had the big exit? And maybe talk to us and give us a little bit of your history with that free markets deal.
Sure. So ironically, free markets was my fund one, check one. The first check I ever wrote was to free markets. And of course, it went public at the height of the internet bubble. And we're like, well, that was fun. We'll just keep doing that over and over again. Turns out not quite so easy. But a lot of lessons there, you're right, learned there. You're right. Shelley was one of the first adopters in industry of the free markets platform. And it did, in fact, have a significant pivot several years into its journey. It was always this reverse auction, enhancing the purchasing power of major Fortune 1000 entities. But in its earliest days, it would charge the suppliers to be in network and to be in the process of being reverse auction in order to sell to major corporates. And what the company found is a year into the contract, 2 years into the contract, the lead of the company has changed and they've sort of forgotten how they got there and get a little grumpy about why we're continually paying for this. The company free markets flipped that model on its head and said, let's build the cost of this, our revenue, the purchasing company's cost into the buyer, not the supplier. And now you've got stability of engagement. General Electric isn't going to go anywhere. They were one of our first, one of Free Market's first customers. And so the notion of who's paying for the service didn't change in magnitude. The unit economics were roughly the same. In fact, they improved a little bit, but the pace of adoption changed dramatically. So recognizing who has the power of the purse and changing the nature of who you're actually selling to dramatically changed the slope of the line as free markets blasted off.
Yeah, that's a fun story. And it's a fun Pittsburgh story and a fun kind of procurement kind of full circle moment here when we think about Dalinea and what we're doing here. So when you think about what's gotten, I think from an investment community, there has been a focus around supply chain and maybe back office things. And that's kind of become more interesting to the investor community. Why do you think that's happened? Why are people gravitating towards supply chain, towards procurement, towards what we would many times have considered back office functions in organizations?
Well, back office functions are often the ugly stepchild. They're underfunded. They're undersupported by corporate IT. It takes a long time to get changes made. So they're not customer facing the way a lot of other applications are. CRM would be an obvious case. But increasingly, the front facing problems have been solved, I'll say. And the opportunity to now dig deeper into the enterprise and say, where are choke points? Where is decision making slow? Where are relationships being bogged down by just historically poor IT or poor just human relations, right? And that stuff now is coming to the forefront. AI, of course, now is infusing everything that everyone touches, back office, front office, and in between, both in terms of development speed, tools being used to write code faster, deploy faster, but also enriching and putting on capabilities that were not possible in the prior incarnation of technology. You know, our $5 million checks 10 and 15 years ago went for servers and what we call the White Sox engineers, the guys you never let out in public in the basement of the building. That became a $500 a month credit card charge to Amazon Cloud or to Google Cloud. And now in the age of AI, we're getting that same incredible multiplier, that 10x or better as we look at this. And in fact, that's become sort of the mantra. You know, people know the notion of the 10x engineer. There's generally one person on the team that's as good as the next 10 combined. Is there a 10x sales exec? Is there a 10x procurement officer? Is there a 10x head of HR that can be amped up like that by using the current states of technology? And I think we're just beginning to crack the code. I think you're just beginning to crack the code on what is possible in better managing procurement spend and not just saving money, but in having insight, in having forethought about why do we do what we do and what should we be thinking about differently, looking over the horizon a little bit.
Yeah, it's turning less of a art and more of a science where you can have real numbers and data to kind of back those visions, and which is really powerful. And so, you know, in that same kind of vein of evolution and how things are evolving, I would say that the world of raising funds. I mean, in the introduction, I highlighted this, but you've navigated and allowed you kind of guided your startups to have over $4 billion in follow-up funding. And so, given the current kind of economic landscape, what macro shifts or trends are you seeing from capital deployment from investors into early stage and even Series A, Series B kind of companies? And when you're going through those shifts, how are you best preparing your founders to navigate that?
Yeah, so the lines are blurring in many ways. What used to be fairly discrete silos of business model and investment concentration are beginning to spill. So classically, somebody would look in at Dalinea and say, oh, supply chain procurement, we get what you do and who you sell to. We're seeing inbounds to you on behalf of you to us from fintech. They're saying this is really about spend management. And fintech, I think, is becoming much more broadly encompassing than it has classically been thought of. But that changes dramatically the eligible investors and the knowledge that can be brought to you, this well-informed contributive board that I'm talking about. So it's not strictly the wonky people out of the supply chain office that is in the back of the building necessarily. And to me, that's really exciting. And the other, again, we can't not talk about AI at some level.
Yeah.
The power of data science and predictive analytics. I think data moats are a relatively new concept, last several years, I would say. But if you can aggregate data and process it in a way that nobody else can, you become the source of truth. And that has value beyond just the transactional nature of, do I buy widgets from this country or that country?
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in terms of how these things are starting to thread together that I think is great opportunity. And I feel like Dalinea is right at the intersection of many of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. And if you think about kind of the last, let's say 100 plus seed stage investments that you have made, what's the non-obvious piece of advice that you find yourself repeating to people like myself, founders, that you wish you kind of knew even 30 years ago?
Well, you already know the answer to this question because I hit you with it all the time. I would say across cycles, decades, industries, rounds, the constant thing I find, the constant thing I find among entrepreneurs is underpricing. So my mantra is always, you have to be 5 times as good as anything else out there and only twice as expensive. And that's a bargain, right? You're never going to compete by, I'm cheaper than X. You've got to have a value proposition that is so spectacular, people will lean into this. So every time you come to me and say, good news, I just landed a customer and this is what they're paying. And I'm like, how come it's not a little more? So be bold, be bold.
I feel like I walked into jail with that one. I definitely,
You did.
I
You
knew
did.
what I was going to say and I asked it anyways. Sean, I think that was a great way to end our session. Is there anything else that you'd like to share to the listeners of Let's Talk Direct?
I'm really excited about the trajectory you're on. You noted that you're Pittsburgh-based. I'm Pittsburgh-based. I'm really bullish on the recent evolution of investment in our region. Be patriotic for the Pittsburgh-based. Carnegie Mellon, of course, is one of the great reservoirs of AI talent and knowledge and development. And we just see so much happening there. And I'm super excited that we got first looks at you, and we're there with you from day one. And looking forward to reading your business plan 7 years after IPO and saying, yeah, I remember when this pivoted.
Yeah, we've made quite some changes. That's for sure. It'll look quite different. But thank you so much, Sean, for being on Let's Talk Direct. For those that want to follow along on Sean's journey, you can find him on LinkedIn. We'll make sure to put his profile on there as well, and make sure to follow along on Dalinea's journey as well, as it's so closely tied to Sean's journey as well. So appreciate everyone listening, and I'll see you at the next Let's Talk Direct.
Thanks.